Could the fluoride in your water be harming your brain? RFK Jr. says yes. And after looking into it, I agree with him. I'm Lorenzo, a dementia care professional with over 20 years experience. Today, we'll uncover whether fluoride could contribute to dementia in folks like you and me. I'm going to talk about the current fluoride controversy, a big study with scary results suggesting that fluoride causes dementia, and why I think RFK Jr. makes a good point, and why I'm trying to cut out as much fluoride as I can from my diet. Along the way, I'll also get into the history of fluoride and how it has become so popular. So use the timestamps to find the parts of the video that interest you the most. In a recent tweet, RFK Jr. announced that the Trump White House will advise U.S. water systems to remove fluoride from public water. He called fluoride an industrial waste associated with arthritis, bone fractures, bone cancer, IQ loss, neurodevelopmental disorders, and thyroid disease. In a separate quote, he said, "I think fluoride is on its way out." And he also said, "I think the faster that it goes out, the better." The current uproar over fluoride started with this study. It looked at pregnant women in Los Angeles who drank fluoridated water and the health of their kids at 3 years of age. They found that if moms had higher levels of fluoride in their urine, their kids were 83% more likely to have behavioral issues like anxiety, emotional reactions, and things like unexplained headaches and stomach aches. But fluoride has been part of the national health scene for decades. It all began in the early 1900s when a dentist in Colorado noticed that his patients had very little tooth decay. He concluded that it was due to the high amounts of fluoride in the water. In 1945, Grand Rapids, Michigan became the first city to add fluoride to its water supply. After 11 years, it was reported that residents had a 60% reduction in cavities. Since 1962, it's been U.S. federal policy to recommend that communities add fluoride to their water. And today, 72% of Americans on public water systems drink fluoridated water. And recently, the CDC declared that water fluoridation was one of the 10 greatest public health achievements of the century because it's such an affordable way to improve people's dental health. But there have been a ton of studies like these that say that high levels of fluoride can cause mental retardation in children. Fluoride is controversial enough that many countries have rejected its use in drinking supplies. Virtually all Western European countries, with the exception of Ireland and small portions of Spain and the UK, don't use it. This controversy raises the question in my mind: if fluoride is bad for kids' brains, what is it doing to our adult brains? Sadly, there is research that supports the idea that fluoride is also bad for adult brains and can lead to dementia. This is a study with the results that I find scary. It looked at 7,000 men and women in Scotland. They adjusted for factors that could influence dementia outcomes, like employment, income, health, education, access to public services, and the like. They concluded that higher levels of fluoride are correlated to dementia risk in both men and women, even when the level of fluoride in the drinking water is low. In the U.S., the CDC recommends a fluoride level of 0.7 milligrams per liter in drinking water as the optimal level to prevent tooth decay and promote good oral health. But in this Scotland study, fluoride levels were much lower than that. They ranged from 0.03 to 0.18 milligrams per liter. In other words, even at the highest level, fluoride was just 1/4 of the CDC recommendation. And the researchers found that even at these low levels of fluoride, the risk of dementia more than doubled to 2.3 times for women and 2.65 for men. It's important to note that we're talking about associated risks. These are correlations, not causations. A great example of a correlation not equaling causation is saying that shark attacks go up when people eat more watermelon. In this case, we can figure out that the likely cause is hot weather. In the summer, we eat more watermelon and people go to the beach, so there are more shark attacks. But the reason you want to be concerned with this study is because an alternate cause, that the dementia is really due to something else, isn't obvious. A lot of smart people assembled and reviewed this research, and while they might be wrong, I personally am not going to bet on that horse. Given the controversy over fluoride, just a few months ago, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services put out a paper covering fluoride exposure and brain development. This is where I'm going to get into the weeds, so if you're not a data nerd like me, you may want to skip ahead to other parts of the video. The paper agreed that higher levels of fluoride, such as 1.5 milligrams per liter, is associated with lower IQ in kids. But they said that there wasn't enough data to know if lower levels, like 0.7 milligrams per liter, which is the level recommended for public drinking supplies, also had a negative effect. And they said there was no evidence that fluoride caused dementia in adults. I have an issue with this guidance because they don't say how much water you should drink. If 1.5 milligrams per liter is too much, but 0.7, basically half, is okay. What if you drink a lot of water? What if you live in a hot climate or do a lot of sports or physical labor? You could easily be consuming enough fluoride to make it dangerous. The paper the Department of Health and Human Services put out is a massive document with 324 pages. They looked at hundreds of studies. You'd hope that from a document like this you could get a level of comfort about fluoride. But in the introduction, they actually say they don't address this issue. They say this monograph and addendum do not address whether the sole exposure to fluoride added to drinking water in some countries, for example, fluoridation at 0.7 milligrams per liter in the US and Canada, is associated with a measurable effect on IQ. So they agree that at high levels it's bad for us, but they don't find evidence that lower levels affect our IQ. But they don't say it's guaranteed to be safe. They just don't have the data. In part, this is a limitation of the scientific process. Most of these studies are observational studies where they go in and look at a population of people over long periods of time, like 10 or 20 years. Researchers try to estimate levels of fluoride, and then they estimate the impact on brain health, and they come up with their conclusions. The challenge is that there are so many variables that are hard to control. In a perfect world, you'd have 10,000 people locked in a room for 20 years that have the exact same lifestyle. Every day, everyone would exercise for the same amount of time. They'd eat the exact same thing every day. No one would smoke. Everyone would go to bed at the same time and get up at the same time. And the only difference is that half would have fluoride and half would not in their drinking water. Obviously, this is an impossible situation. Researchers have to use the data that is available to them. So we're stuck with research that might have flaws. And this is where the US government paper troubles me. They do a respectable job of reviewing all data available, but for lots of reasons, they decide to exclude studies that they feel could be unreliable. And one of the studies they decided to exclude was this study done in Scotland. Some of the reasons they gave for excluding are that it didn't take account of other sources of fluoride exposure. For example, you can get fluoride from dental treatments and certain foods. Another thing they didn't account for was smoking. The study would definitely be better if you could know these factors. But this information, whether someone was a smoker or not, or if they had exposure to fluoride from other sources, wasn't available. Smoking is indeed a big risk factor for dementia, but a lot of research has been done on it. The general finding is that while it increases your risk for dementia, it just doesn't increase it as much as the increases in dementia that were correlated to fluoride in the Scotland study. This review of 37 studies looked at smokers. It found that people who smoke are 30 to 40% more likely to get dementia. That's a 1.3 to 1.4x increase in risk compared to a 2.3 to 2.65 times increase in the Scotland study. I don't think these are valid reasons to throw out the study. First, it appeared in the British Journal of Psychiatry, published by Cambridge University Press. This is no fly-by-night outfit. To get published in this journal, you have to go through significant peer review, and they have to determine that your methods are sound. In addition, the journal has an impact factor of 9.1. That is incredibly high. Impact factors are used to rank the importance of journals. They measure the number of times articles in the journal are cited by other scientists. With an impact factor of over 9, the British Journal of Psychiatry is roughly in the top 2.5% of all academic journals. This means that it's highly regarded and is influential in its field. So the decision of the Department of Health and Human Services to disregard this piece of research strikes me as odd. There's a lot to suggest that it is actually a solid study. And you can't say that it was done in an unprofessional manner. In fairness to both sides of the argument, the government reviewers did include a well-constructed study that accounted for things like smoking and drinking. They agreed that at high levels, fluoride increases your risk of dementia. But they couldn't say that at this 0.7 milligrams per liter, which is recommended for public water supplies, that it was enough to have an impact on brain health. Again, this troubles me. If we know that fluoride at a certain level is a poison and can affect our IQ, why do we tolerate it at any level? Many other studies reinforce the finding that fluoride is bad for our brains. This study, in the International Journal of Molecular Science, looked at fluoride in Alzheimer's disease. It confirmed that fluoride passes the blood-brain barrier, which means that it gets into our brains, and that it contributes to cell destruction and inflammation in the nervous system. And this article in the International Journal of Pharmaceutical Sciences and Research states fluoride is a highly toxic element. Aside from drinking water, we get exposed to fluoride in everyday products like certain foods, toothpaste, and nonstick pans. Fluoride does cross the blood-brain barrier and interferes with the normal metabolic process of the brain. It generates free radicals and has various toxic effects. Some fluoride is expelled by our bodies, but excess fluoride builds up in our blood cells, soft tissues, and hard tissues, leading to systemic disorders. And this very recent study in neuroscience had similar conclusions, that a certain amount of fluoride prevents cavities, but too much will lead to cognitive impairment. According to the book, The Fluoride Wars, opposition to fluoride in drinking water is not new. In the 1940s and 50s, during the so-called Red Scare, people on the far right of American politics claimed that fluoridation was part of a communist plot. One prominent person who was against fluoride said that fluoridation was better than using the atom bomb, because the atom bomb has to be made and transported to the place you want to destroy, while fluoride is added to the water which we consume as a daily necessity. Another conspiracist was quoted as saying that repeated doses of small amounts of fluoride will in time reduce an individual's power to resist domination by slowly poisoning and narcotizing a certain area of the brain, and thus will make him submissive to the will of those who wish to govern him. These certainly are extreme points of view, but there is some validity because at some level fluoride is a poison, and when it's in the drinking water, you really can't control the dose. In 1997, the journal Perspectives in Biology and Medicine published an opinion piece, Why I Changed My Mind About Water Fluoridation, by John Cahoon, a New Zealand dentist and the principal dental officer for the capital city, Auckland. He had been a strong advocate of fluoridation for many years, but found to his surprise that children where the water was not fluoridated had just as good or better reduction in cavities as kids in the area with fluoride. He provided this graph showing that tooth decay was already on the decline before fluoridation was a thing. He said that the real cause of improved dental health was better nutrition. He noted that after World War II, there was a rise in the standard of living. More people were drinking milk and eating fruits and vegetables, all made more possible by the introduction of household refrigerators. This, in his mind, was the real reason why dental health showed constant improvement following the end of World War II. In an interview in 1998, he shared his story of how he had been in favor of fluoride, but then changed his mind and became vehemently opposed to it.
When you work in a health service and are promoting the health of children, in my case the oral health of children, and you suddenly discover that what you've been doing has been poisoning those children, that was the crucial point in my career when I became publicly opposed to water fluoridation.
His change of opinion did not make him popular with dentists, and there are a lot of articles saying that he fell victim to quack science. Now, I'm not a dentist, and I can't comment on who's right in this particular case, but I think it's notable that someone who is an internationally recognized dentist changed his mind so dramatically. In instances like this, I remind myself that for centuries, there were a lot of smart people and science experts who were sure that the Earth was at the center of the universe. There are a number of organizations that want to remove fluoride from our drinking water. One, called the Fluoride Action Network, provides a white paper titled 50 Reasons to Oppose Fluoridation. I don't agree with all of them, and all 50 reasons don't seem to be equally meaningful, but I think a few stand out. Number one is that fluoridation is not ethical, in the sense that when you add it to the public water, everyone is forced to drink it. This is one of the main reasons why European countries have ruled it out. Number two is that the dosage can't be controlled. Once you put fluoride in the water, it's impossible to control the dose because we all drink different amounts. Number three is that fluoride builds up in our tissues. According to this study, only 50% of the fluoride we ingest is passed through our urine. The remainder stays in our bodies and builds up in our bones and soft tissues. And many studies confirm that it passes the placenta in pregnant moms and also passes the blood-brain barrier. Number five is that fluoride is a toxin. It's a fact that at some level, it's just bad for us. And lastly, that fluoridation is not necessary. Most European countries have rejected water fluoridation, but have nevertheless had the same decline in childhood dental decay as fluoridated countries. See this graphic with data from the World Health Organization. Countries that rely on fluoridated water are shown in red, and ones that don't use fluoride are shown in blue. Over the last 40 years, dental health has improved equally in both groups. Now, can we get fluoride from other sources? Fluoride does occur naturally in the environment, but unless you live in an area with high air pollution, exposure from the air is not going to be significant. Most groundwater in the United States and many parts of the world has a tiny amount of fluoride, but in certain parts of the US, especially western states, the levels in groundwater can get very high. And what about food? In general, food sources are also not a big source of fluoride, but if the food is grown with fluoridated water or is in areas where the soil has high fluoride content or where phosphate fertilizers are used, the levels go up. The food products with the highest levels of fluoride are tea, coffee, and shellfish. Tea plants absorb a lot of fluoride through their roots and it builds up in their leaves. The same goes for coffee. Coffee beans absorb fluoride during their growth, and volcanic soils in particular have higher fluoride levels. And if you prepare your tea or coffee with fluoridated water, you're getting an even bigger dose. And shellfish absorb fluoride from the surrounding water, and that builds up over time in their bodies. But we also get exposed to fluoride with products like toothpaste and fluoride rinses. Of course, we're not supposed to swallow these, but sometimes you do. My point with this is not to bore you, but I've spent a lot of time looking at a number of reports, and I'm really troubled. The numbers matter because fluoride is a poison. At some point, it does us a lot of harm. Most water supplies have fluoride in the range of 0.7 to 1.2 milligrams per liter. And the CDC tells us that 0.7 milligrams is okay, and 1.5 milligrams can lead to IQ decline. So I wondered, if you live somewhere where fluoride levels are supposedly okay, how much more do you have to drink to get to the point where it actually affects your IQ? I provide the detailed math in the description, but it amounts to just 3 more cups of water a day or 2 cans of juice or soda if it's made with fluoridated water. The difference between what the CDC says is a safe level and levels that are dangerous is very small. And for any one of us, this can easily be achieved. So the title of this video is, Does Fluoride Cause Dementia? I believe the answer is unequivocally yes. I also feel that the federal government has presented information in such a way that it defends its fluoride policy and makes it sound like the current state of fluoridation in our country is acceptable. However, fluoride is a toxin. Evidence shows that it prevents tooth decay, although some experts challenge that notion. High levels of fluoride are indeed associated with lower IQs in kids. About 50% of all fluoride we consume stays in our bodies. Fluoride does pass the placenta in pregnant women and our blood-brain barrier. And evidence shows that it also causes dementia in older people. The big question that's hard to answer is, how much is too much? Should we put fluoride in our drinking water? That wasn't the point of this video, but my opinion after all this is no. I think it makes a lot more sense to improve oral health through a good diet and good hygiene with fluoride toothpaste and topical treatments. Sugars and carbs are bad for our teeth because the bacteria in our mouth thrive on sugar. When they digest it, they produce acid, which causes cavities. It's ironic that the same thing, sugar, that contributes to dementia also contributes to tooth decay. Check with your dentist, but if you maintain good dental hygiene and avoid excess sugars, it may be that you don't need as much fluoride as the experts suggest. I grew up on a farm and now I live in a rural area, so a good portion of my life I've always had well water, which was not fluoridated. Thankfully, I've had great dental health. But after this research, I'm concerned about the fluoride that I might be consuming through carbonated waters. I gave up sodas years ago and started to enjoy flavored sparkling waters like LaCroix, which have become so popular. But now that I realize they probably contain fluoride and there's no easy way for me to know, I'm just drinking fewer of these and a lot more of this. What are your thoughts? Is RFK right or wrong? Thank you for watching, and please see all my videos here devoted to how you can take the best care of yourself and your loved ones.